you live.
Hey everybody, welcome to the 53rd week of the Free Assange Online Vigil series. Today I have my co-host Steve Poikinen joining me, and we have special guest Tariq Haddad with us. Before we get in though, I do want to go over some numbers with everybody. This is day 3,504 since the illegal and arbitrary detention of Julian Assange started inside the Ecuadorian embassy. This is day 457 since the WikiLeaks publisher was trafficked to Belmarsh prison following a $4.2 billion IMF loan to the nation of Ecuador. There is 58 days until the second phase of Julian Assange's show trial and extraordinary rendition hearings start. We have, I believe it is 1,134 days of incarceration for Reality Winner, and it is 120 days of freedom for Chelsea Manning. So I do just want to take a moment here to shout out our GoFundMe. We are trying to host 3 weeks of protests out in the Washington, D.C. area for when Julian's rendition hearing takes place. I'm going to post that link up in the chat. We're about a quarter of our way to the goal right now, and we're a little under 60 days out. So anything you guys can do to help share the link, to help spread it around, or to donate would be absolutely awesome.
Dig deep and encourage your friends to dig deep and encourage their friends to dig deep and encourage their friends' enemies to also dig. We're trying to get to DC for 3 weeks. It's it's no small undertaking is what we're getting at. I'm really glad that friend of the Vigils and of Slow News Day, Tariq Haddad, is with us again today. It's good to see you, man. How are you doing, aside from being ridiculously and jealousy-inducing handsome?
No, I'm good. Yeah, it's good to see you guys. Good to be back with you guys. Kind of life in lockdown, I guess, in this weird limbo state where I guess, everyone's just trying to have a normal life in kind of very unnormal circumstances. But yeah, I've been okay. Just kind of started working on a few kind of Assange-related projects and things. As we were discussing before we got online, just kind of taking a bit more of a behind-the-scenes kind of role at the moment, just getting things set up. But yeah, some kind of exciting things that we can get into about what we're planning to do with the future, with kind of covering the hearings and sort of journalism in general related to Assange. But yeah, happy to see you guys again, and it's good to see you guys kind of continue this show. You guys,
yeah, I'm really happy to have you back with us. It's been probably a little over a month and a half, maybe more, since we've had you on. And there's been a lot of developments around the world and in the UK and the US since then. But I did want to ask, because we've seen everything from Julian getting a radio to one of his lawyers get appointed justice minister over in France. And he's also a gentleman that's been fighting to have France grant Julian political asylum. So if you could you talk a little bit just about your opinions about how everything's kind of been unrolling in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it kind of shows, I think, that like Assange's case has kind of affected so many different people's lives in so many different ways. And, it's not just, the story's not isolated to, one particular city. It's not just what's happening in London, it's what's happening in Washington, D.C. and across Europe and in Australia as well. I think we had, so we keep seeing these kind of little promising signs for the case in general. So we had something from the local government in Melbourne. They passed a committee. I forget sort of exact wording of it, but several kind of local MPs in Australia kind of signed a motion to, I believe it was to get him home to Australia and to kind of call for more consular support from the Australian government, which they haven't been giving throughout the hearings, obviously. But we're starting to see a lot more of these things. And then, like you mentioned, one of Julian Assange's lawyers getting appointed the legal minister in France. I don't think that's going to make any sort of significant changes to the overall overall standing of the case, but kind of with that particular instance, I think it just shows to the kind of the expertise of Assange's legal team. I think if you kind of go through all the different various members that Assange has had on his various on his legal team at various points, they've all been people that have routinely kind of stood up for human rights, and I've had a look at some of their cases. Some of them were kind of fighting against British government and Pinochet. They were involved in that, and so it's not this appointment's not going to change anything, I think, for Assange's kind of legal situation, but it's just kind of one of those constant little flickers of hope and development that we're seeing.
Oh, sorry, I'm trying to get some stuff out. I had something, god damn it, and it was related to what you were saying. Let's back up a little bit though. Let's talk about what the future of the watchdog looks like, and what you have kind of in the works heading towards the rendition show trial that's going to take place at the Old Bailey in September.
Yeah. So in terms of the watchdog, I've kind of mentioned a few times, I've been working on trying to kind of make a new model for journalism. Kind of that's still work in progress. And in the last couple of months, I've been approached by some investigative journalists. Don't know if I should kind of get into too much detail at the moment, because I'm not sure if people are happy to kind of publicly say that they're involved in this project just yet. But a kind of solid group of investigative journalists that have a long history of doing kind of major investigations. Kind of together, we're going to be working on seeing if we can kind of plot, find more holes in the kind of storyline in the kind of Assange hearing. So we're going to be kind of starting pretty much from fresh and trying to lay out a brand new timeline, and just kind of get all the basic facts down, and then just kind of go from there and see if there's parts of the story that kind of we feel like haven't got enough attention, or if we think there's something that hasn't been kind of explained to enough detail, or even if it's just a matter of like misinformation, where the public thinks, or the majority of the public thinks one thing and the evidence shows one thing. I think it's about kind of just showing, contrasting those two things together. But that's still kind of very early in the works. We're kind of working to get funding at the moment, looking at different ways of doing that. So that's all kind of still in the works, but it's going to be a lengthy process. And so that's kind of something I've learned in the last few months is these things don't just kind of come together very quickly. But the good news is that they're we're kind of in communication. We're looking at getting this thing sort of set up. So, and hopefully, we'll be ready to go by September when the kind of hearings start again at the Old Bailey. So we'll see.
What was your initial reaction to this superseding indictment that sort of expanded the charges on the cyber crime portion of Julian's indictment, and what do you think about the possible criminalization of the people who quite bravely helped Ed Snowden get to Russia?
Yeah, I think my immediate reaction, and I'm sure the kind of same with a lot of people, is that as soon as I saw it, my instinct was that it was moving the goalposts once again. It wasn't, it's the kind of the same thing that we've seen throughout this sort of 10-year process, where it starts off with one particular charge which gets dropped, or there's not sufficient evidence, and then the prosecution has just sort of added this on 2 weeks before the next the next hearing is going to start with Julian already not having very much contact time with his lawyers, already a kind of a massive uphill battle to prepare for the case, and to show that they can just do that without without adequately providing documents to the lawyers, as has been discussed. It kind of just shows the blatant disregard for kind of any sort of rule of law or due process or anything like that. And then I think, like we've seen throughout these 10 years, it was very blatant that what it was trying to do was, instead of point to anything that was solid or that kind of showed any actual illegal wrongdoing, it was essentially trying to character smear Assange into making him sound as though he's a hacker. And obviously this is it's murkying the waters for people, because Assange did have a background in hacking before WikiLeaks, and he is someone who's very good with computers, and he understands cryptography and all these things. He wouldn't have been able to set up WikiLeaks without that. But I think they're kind of trying to blur the waters of what WikiLeaks actually did in that time. Of it created a platform where whistleblowers felt secure enough to give highly sensitive documents, and in many cases it was they came forward to WikiLeaks on their own volition because they saw some criminality or war crimes or something, and they felt a moral obligation to do the things that they were doing. And now we're seeing kind of the thrust of the argument be changed to, Assange hacked these documents or he obtained them illegally, rather than the kind of standard journalistic practice.
I mean, and that's absolutely insane, because if you go to the Washington Post website right now, or the New York Times website right now, or any major news outlet, there's a way for you to securely transfer leaked material to them. Yeah. And you may have, if you're the person submitting the documents, you may have obtained them extra legally. Mm-hmm. But the outlet doesn't care. They care about the veracity of the documents. So they're going to try to protect you as a source as much as possible. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this is just one more aspect that highlights the Trump administration's attack on journalism, where they've picked up the ball from the previous administration and taken it a step further. And, and it's, again, I understand that COVID is happening, but that shouldn't be the only thing in the news. Like, they're downplaying the fact that Ghislaine Maxwell got arrested. I honestly, like, I don't see a lot of that. And then you've got my old boss, Chris Hayes, going on TV talking about how horrible and what a terrible standard Trump set by commuting Roger Stone's sentence, and reminding people falsely that Stone was the go-between between the Trump administration and WikiLeaks. Like, that's what he told his audience. There's not a shred of proof to that whatsoever. In fact, the opposite was proved in court, that there was zero back-channeling between Roger Stone and WikiLeaks. Yet Chris Hayes is confident enough to lie to his audience like that, because his audience is there for confirmation of their biases, not to learn anything, not to get news, I guess, from their news guy. They're there to be coddled, and it is infinitely frustrating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, all I would say about that really is that I think we've known about this for a long time with the media. And it's frustrating, but I mean, the attitude I personally take is that, and I think this is what you guys are doing so well, is that we're making our own media. And and so it's good to kind of constantly analyze them and kind of, and people like Armada and yourselves do that very well, where they're constantly kind of taking these, showing the lies that these people are putting out. But, at the same time, I think, we just, continue to put out the correct news. And I think, that's why hopefully that your channel is growing, and many other sort of kind of non-mainstream platforms are growing, and they all seem to be. It doesn't, it's the whole podcasting thing, and that whole revolution seems to be caused by people wanting a more genuine kind of news and more genuine information. So they'll have their day where they kind of ruin, not telling the truth. So
yeah, it's weird how the major opinions of people and where they get their media from has shifted so heavily from like standard print to TV, radio, and now it's almost wholly digital. Mm-hmm. And everyone has different media sources that confirm different biases and have different, I don't know, like propagandized perspectives of the situation right now. So getting put in the same sentence as Aaron Mate for the work that we're doing is I really appreciate that, because we're trying our best just to make sure that the information about Julian's situation isn't lost to the general public. Mm-hmm. One of the things, though, Aaron's done over at Gray Zone a great piece about the UC Global case and the spying against Julian Assange. And we've seen everything. We've talked about it a whole lot, from them putting microphones throughout the embassy into the girls' bathroom, trying to get a hold of the baby's diapers. And I was just wondering, as a journalist, as someone who does hard-hitting national security stories, what your opinion of what happened with UC Global, but also, have you seen anything along the lines of this in your own career as a journalist?
I've experienced it firsthand, and I've spoken to. I didn't spend a lot of time outside the Ecuadorian embassy, but I've spoken to a lot of the activists that have done, and they said that the spying wasn't just confined to Julian; it was on them, and they could see the the special kind of laser. Microphones that work with a laser that can work, across, through walls and long distances. I don't know too much about that technology, but it sounds frightening. We constantly saw a heavy police presence with body cams, etc., constantly outside the embassy, and we've been seeing that outside of court. I've kind of spoken to a few people that have been sort of close to WikiLeaks or have worked for WikiLeaks in one manner or another, and what's happened to Assange over the last 10 years it has happened to them previously, but they're also kind of more and more getting exposed to that. So that's why I think it kind of goes back to why Assange's story is so important, because it's not just Assange. Essentially, it's what could be the fate of all journalists, and journalists are already experiencing these kind of things where they're getting surveilled, their conversations are getting spied on. In some minority of cases, rare cases, people's physical safety becomes threatened. It's not unknown for undercover agents or police to kind of break into people's apartments, or this has been documented quite heavily in the UK with Extinction Rebellion especially. There's kind of groups that have been dedicated to this, and I think we've discussed this before with Elizabeth Muller, but you have kind of agents posing as boyfriends and getting into relationships with activists and these kind of things, and this has been happening with the Assange with Assange activists as just as much. I'm sure they get spied on, their communications get monitored. There's, for some of the activists I've seen, fake media pieces be published about them kind of attacking what they were doing, and accusing them of various things. So the kind of playbook that we've seen on Julian happens to everyone, and it's basically what happens to anyone that kind of steps out of the expected lines that you're supposed to tread in if you're going to cover the news for a mainstream publication, I think, for a lot of the time. But yeah, so I kind of rambled on and lost my point as usual.
Yeah, no problem. So I did want to touch on an article with you, though, because I know we have probably about 10 to 15 minutes before we got to let you go. But there was an article recently published in the Canterbury Times over in Australia, and it's titled, "When the Government Prosecutes Whistleblowers, It's Sending a Message." Do you want to dive into that a little bit, Steve?
Yeah, let me pull it up. That's not the right one. There it is. All right. So again, this is out of the Canberra Times. It begins, "We're in the midst of a public health and economic crisis, and the federal government is regularly making momentous and life-altering decisions, including exerting the authority of the state to limit, sometimes with good reason," I don't know why they would include that, "basic civil liberties. Just when our need for integrity and accountability is at its greatest, our system of checks and balances is at its weakest. Under the coalition government, whistleblowers are being prosecuted for daring to expose secrets and practices which damage or embarrass the government and its agencies. Worse still, the lawyers of whistleblowers are being prosecuted, and in perhaps the most worrying signs of decay of public accountability, Australia's fourth estate, the free press, on whom we can normally rely to expose all sorts of wrongdoing without fear or favor, is being prosecuted, and the funding to our public broadcaster systematically gutted." This is specifically relating to the case that David McBride, Australian whistleblower, who's been on this show, who's been on my show, and is starting to get more attention internationally. This relates 100% to the documents that he gave to the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Company, about Australia's role in committing war crimes in Afghanistan. This is a very frightening turn of events, Tarek, because they're not just criminalizing the whistleblower or the journalist, they're criminalizing the people who are defending them as well. And if this precedent is set, even just in Australia, I have a hard time believing that the rest of the Five Eyes countries won't pick up similar practices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I think, for us, we've seen this kind of throughout with this kind of Assange stuff, is that, whatever seems to happen in New Zealand or Australia, they kind of seem to be like the testing ground almost for things to spread elsewhere. So we kind of actually see things happen in those two countries kind of 5 years before we start seeing them in the US and the UK. But it definitely shows us why these things need to be taken seriously, because it's not kind of hypotheticals now about if you don't stand up for Assange, you're going to lose freedom of speech. We're actually seeing it in practice, and it's becoming more and more regular now. It's not just this is not the only case that we can talk of. And that's just a sign in itself, right? That we're seeing this more and more with anyone that's doing any sort of national security reporting.
And I think we've got to include journalists who are covering the Black Lives Matter protests in that. Like, I think that, in my opinion, that will fall under the category of national security reporting, because the protests themselves are being presented in the media and viewed by a lot of, I don't know, milquetoast idiots as a threat to the national security and the security of the United States. And there have been over 600 journalists now who have been targeted, who have been harassed, who have been shot at and shot and locked up, simply for covering these protests, not because they had an angle, but because they were there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. That's like a very tricky situation, I think, because a lot of it, I think, seems to be there is just like this angst in the air. But for sure that, like 2020 has been a year where we're kind of, everything that we've kind of been talking about is kind of starting to come to fruition of, if you don't respect the press, and Trump's famously kind of attacked the press for a long time, and there's been lots of different developments, but that's definitely a troubling trend. I don't know how much the kind of police brutality on journalists in the Black Lives Matter is directly correlated to the surveillance stuff, but it's it's a threat nonetheless, right? I think we've said this before, we're kind of just seeing everything, all our various democratic functions are kind of seemingly collapsing at once, right? It's not just one particular thing. It's like freedom of speech is collapsing, and then all sorts of other things are happening at the same time.
Yeah, it's time for people to go out and buy the conspiracy theorist in their life a drink and an apology. Because for 20 some years, when people were like, well, they're going to usher in a pandemic, and once the pandemic is ushered in, then they're going to take away this and this and this and this and this. And people went, you wear tinfoil underwear on your head. And now here we are in the midst of a pandemic that kills 0.04% of the population at worst, behaving like it's the prequel to World War Z, and the only way that you'll be better, the only way that you will be safe from this virus is if you take the advice of eugenicist billionaires. And that just, I don't know, dude. It's a big head scratcher to me. Like, why you would listen to Bill Gates or Peter Thiel about anything, or trust them with anything, trust their products with anything, is just so far beyond my realm of comprehension.
Well, at this point, Palantir has gotten the contracts for the US, the UK, and Australia's health data. So they have the data of every citizen from 3 of the Five Eyes countries for them to literally sift through and database as they please.
Did you want to get to that chat question, Andrew? We can throw that around, then I'll come back to the article. There's a good closing paragraph in the article that I want to touch on.
Yeah. So what decentralized community platforms would you suggest to find out how Julian is doing, as well as his progress? I would say defend.wikileaks.org. As well
Try
as
us. We've been doing this pretty consistently. But yeah, defendwikileaks.org. Wise Up Action, Emmy's group, they do wonderful stuff. The JADC, the Julian Assange Defense Campaign, they do good stuff. Look at, follow Bean on Twitter, because if there's something monumental happening, Bean will have whipped up a very well put together, informative, concise graphic on it, and you can just visually take it in. Do you have more, Andre? Tarek, do you? Follow the watchdog for sure. Caitlin Johnstone will frequently pop off with there will be a ridiculous eye-grabbing title. I have an article up from hers right now, and I think it's titled liberals are crazy idiots. And then, like, through it all, she'll tie it back in to why it's necessary to support Julian Assange. Like, there's a number of places that you can go that the good thing about supporting Julian Assange is that all of the sources of information that you're going to find that are proliferating accurate information are decentralized. Mostly because telling the truth about Julian Assange is something that will get you shadow banned or defunded or automatically have subscribers automatically unsubbed from your channel,
or fired if you work for a major media institution.
Do what?
Or fired if you work for a major media institution, like the guy we met outside of the Hill.
Yeah, that when we were in DC last and we did our media day protest, we were standing in front of the building that houses Politico and the Hill and a couple of other outlets. And one of the journalists from the Hill came out and he was talking to us, and he was very nervous that he might be on camera being caught talking to activists about Julian Assange, and was like, oh, we had one guy write some pretty good articles about the precedent that will be set, assuming this prosecution goes forward. Let me go get them. I'll bring them out to you. And he comes back out and he tells us straight up, like, I could get fired for vocalizing my support of Julian Assange, but I want you to know that I do. And that's a pervasive attitude in mainstream outlets where journalists are aware of the fallout and the consequences of the persecution and prosecution of Julian Assange. They're aware of it, they're afraid of it, but vocalizing it means they lose their gig. Is that a situation that you found also, like, among mainstream journalists in the UK, or are they just so deep into that bubble that there's no, I know we've talked about this before, Terry.
Yeah.
I think it was months and months ago, and I think it might have even been on my show, so it would be worth rehashing a bit of that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really does depend. There's some journalists here still at mainstream places that hold Assange in the highest regard, whereas some don't. For example, we had Peter Oborne. I don't know if that name's familiar to you, but he's a kind of a conservative writer. He used to write for the Telegraph, which is kind of the kind of the right-wing newspaper of the UK, and then moved to the Daily Mail. But in spite of that, he's actually a very well-respected journalist, and I think so as well. I'm not. I think it's kind of in our kind of political climate, it's almost especially because was or am of the left. I don't even know anymore, but it would be sacrilege to say that a journalist, a right-wing journalist was actually good. But in my opinion, Peter Oborne is one of those people that is a good journalist. But he's openly been supportive of Assange for a while. He's written several very good pieces, and actually this might have been missed in the US, but Patrick Coburn as well wrote a very good piece, and this was in the London Review of Books, which is very influential with sort of media elites, and this was, I think, maybe 6 weeks ago. A complete kind of defense of Assange. So that's in a significant publication with I think several MPs and politicians in the UK read that. So it's not all doom and gloom, but I know that on the flip side of that, of course, there's the kind of there is the attitude with certain people that they've just kind of believed everything that come out of the propaganda just with the rest of the foreign policy, so it's the kind of, I guess, the knee-jerk go-to thing to believe now is that they're kind of working with Putin somehow. And it's just, very, very lazy arguments that you'll get about, oh, they're a, Putin puppet or something. And and I think that's why these smears are so successful, because they're so easy and lazy. They're very easy to throw out and then it takes a long time to kind of dispel them, and you have just to explain something about the the rape allegations, for example. It would take you sort of 20-30 minutes to unpack all the evidence, and this is your starting position to prove certain things. When I met some of Assange's friends, they were kind of just so like fed up of trying to explain all the misinformation, because they've almost given up, because so I don't know if it's almost better to kind of just focus on the positive things that he did and just try and say things outright, or kind of constantly be trying to correct. It's a difficult balance.
Yeah, there's two ways that you can go about it. You just hit on both of them, and one is correcting the record, which is hilarious, because that was a super PAC for Hillary Clinton in 2016 called Correct the Record, and their job was to lie about Hillary Clinton. That was the entire purpose of Correcting the Record, was to make sure that the record was putting out false information. But when it comes to Julian Assange, there's like Caitlin Johnstone put together a wonderful article, massive article, called Debunking All the Assange Smears. And it gets updated because there's new shit that just kind of rolls down the establishment media pipeline, and it's so goddamn tiring. I mean, it is so draining to be like, okay, let's back up, put yourself back to 2010, and walk people through 10, almost 12 years of just malicious false reporting. You can't unpack that in a 2-minute soundbite. You can't unpack that in a 30-second soundbite. The Nils Melzer interview, where he does unpack all of that and provides evidence. Like, if you were to put it in a print magazine, it would be a 15 or 20 page interview. Of just and that's one smear. That's just one part of the issue, and we've got multiple fronts. The one that I get fairly often is, oh, I'd like to support him, but he's responsible for Trump. Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
And an Australian journalist and publisher does not have the power to activate 160 million U.S. citizens who don't vote. If you want to know why Trump is the president, look at nearly 40 years of unobstructed Reaganomics and neoliberalism. Look at those two things. Realize that Donald Trump is the natural progression of ideologue and monster in a country where elections are illegitimate and the contestants are pre-selected, and the outcome is the deep state always wins. That's why you have Donald Trump. It's got nothing to do with the fact that legitimate information about Trump's opponent was released. The people who read that and understood it weren't lining up to vote for Hillary Clinton in the first fucking place. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Andrew, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in the documents that came out around the Roger Stone case, we actually found out that Julian was but had the idea that Bernie Sanders could also use this information that was being put out. And that's why it was timed in such a way to be released successively in the lead up to and during the Democratic National Convention in 2016, because it was supposed to be high impact journalism, specifically to expose the corruption within the democratic institution of the Democratic National Convention, right? So that's the part that always bothers me about the argument that, well, he helped Donald Trump win. Like, no, he didn't help Donald Trump win. Bernie Sanders just didn't say, hey, look at this. This is insane. I've been calling out this corruption and this election rigging for literally the last 2 years of my campaign. Here's the print that proves it. And then open the litigation and open the court cases necessary.
Yeah, I think like 2010 was like the pivot. 2012 was a pivotal year for this. You know, if Bernie had any sort of backbone, things might have been very different. But you know, he kind of just let the Democratic Party kind of get away with the corruption because he was the only one that was really in a position to call it out. I think, you know, if he had been sort of vociferous in his condemnation of it, it would have been a lot bigger of an issue, but he didn't mention it once, as far as I'm aware, like any of the election rigging stuff or any of the revelations that came out about Hillary Clinton. You know, it was very easy, you know, especially like on the left side of things, it was very easy to kind of be anti-Trump when he was saying things like lock her up. It sounded like, you know, why are we, you know, it was like you know, like that's not a presidential thing to say. But actually, like, in retrospect, and I wrote this in my most recent article, it's like I completely sympathize with like the slogans that Trump had, like in terms of for his campaign of like locking Hillary Clinton up. You know, she's arguably one of the biggest war criminals in the US. You know, so it's like a lot of these slogans actually, yeah, you know, Trump was the manifestation of everything that, you know, Steve had just described, and to kind of blame it on Russia was just this kind of a stupid line of thinking that is clearly sort of that can be, you know, shred apart. But unfortunately, that's what, you know, the Democratic Party pushed that lie. But at the same time, it's, you know, that's also what possibly gives Assange, you know, an opportunity, because in sort of, you know, because of the pressure that the Democrats placed on Trump with the whole Russia scandal, you know, Trump felt so much pressure that he sent congressmen and certain officials to the Ecuadorian embassy to talk with Julian, and you know, these show the political nature of the case, which is now being used as evidence. You know, and they show the sort of level of involvement of different officials, and I think, you know, it's highlighting potential breaches in abuse of power. Because I was only starting to become aware of this in the last week or so, but there's evidence that the State Department was helping the Department of Justice with the investigation, so that could potentially be illegal if that's proven to be the case. So, you know, as a result of that, there are, you know, potential pieces of evidence that could be used to help Assange in the long run. And, you know, we've also got this kind of ongoing several court cases regarding Seth Rich. And, you know, I think these will be, you know, hopefully these will be dealt with soon, and because they'll have a big impact on the overall perspective of things, hopefully, if they receive any media coverage at all. But it's not guaranteed.
So the part of the, you mentioned earlier talking about basically the back channels that Trump had set up to get in contact with Julian Assange in regards to the Trump-Russia collusion scandal and things. Mm-hmm. And I believe it was actually that there was some involvement from Kim.com in that as well, getting Dana Rohrabacher, I believe his name was, to actually be a courier for Trump's message to Julian. Mm-hmm. And I was just wondering if you could talk about that a little bit more in those like surrounding situations.
And then I know Tarek's been here for 45 minutes, so if you got to bounce after that, please do. And then you can let this be your final thoughts, and please let people know where they can find you and find the Watchdog and all that kind of good stuff. And thank you, Tarek. I really enjoy catching up with you.
You too. Yeah, I think I've discussed this with Steve before, but I think you know, I was kind of around the time of Seth Rich's death. In the kind of left-wing media circles, anyway, it became like a no-go topic with the whole Pizzagate. You know, it got confounded and made into, you know, an area that couldn't be touched as a journalist. But I believe that kind of in the right-wing media, it was kind of still pursued. And then you guys might have to correct me here because I don't actually know very much about Q and that kind of movement. But I believe that, you know, a lot of this actual like kind of evidence-based kind of digging up old information came from groups like Q and 4chan, you know, where they kind of dug into the Seth Rich stuff. But in terms of the, you know, so that became a thing in right-wing politicians, and it was, you know, there were several congressmen that were openly discussing Seth Rich's murder, you know, very publicly. It wasn't like it was a conspiracy to talk about it. And then Sean Hannity was talking about it on Fox News quite openly. And then I believe one of these Fox News interviews with Dana Rohrabacher caught the attention of Trump in, I believe, maybe 2017. And then, you know, Rohrabacher was invited to the White House to have a meeting with Trump, and then went to London shortly after to meet with Assange. And, you know, as we can guess, they were trying to prove that the leaks did not come from Russia, which was what Trump was getting pressure about, and to prove that, you know, I wouldn't go as far as saying that they wanted to prove that the leaker was Seth Rich, because that would be very harmful to the Democrats, to show that actually the leaker was one of your staffers, you know, that was kind of sick of all the corruption in the DNC. So that would give kind of campaign a big political win. And like we've discussed before, you know, Julian did the ethical thing from a journalism point of view of not revealing the identity of your sources, and you know, protecting that kind of reputation of whistleblowers as well. Because I think, you know, if you reveal that sources get killed on a regular basis for these kind of leaks, it stops people leaking documents. And that's why things like WikiLeaks and the Courage Foundation were built, was to kind of make it easier to reduce the risk to these people, because they do, you know, it is a brave action to whistleblow, and it's getting harder and harder. So yeah, you know, Assange did the right thing and protected him, but because of that, now we have evidence of how, you know, Trump and people like Richard Grenell kind of orchestrated these meetings. And, you know, what also was, I've kind of just recently learned, there was kind of FBI agents that were involved in those meetings that we still don't know very much about. But it looks like, yeah, it was kind of, the prosecution happened as a revenge on Assange for not kind of giving up Seth Rich's name. And then also we know it's because, you know, shortly after that, Assange had released the Vault 7 documents. So that showed that the US was spying on China as well. So I think after Assange did that, it was kind of, it became a political persecution.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Tarek, for joining us today. If you could let people know where they can find you and your work.
Sure. So it's I'm Tarek_Haddad on Twitter, and TarekHaddad.com. TheWatchdog.net is also where you can usually find my work. It's down at the moment, but it's just being repaired and be up soon. But yeah, TarekHaddad.com or TheWatchdog.net. And thanks, guys, for having me and doing an awesome job as usual.
So, Kat Terrell in my chat on Slow News Day has been trying to get me to get you to smile the entire time that we've been live. So look, dude, that's a genuine smile. You can't see it because it's not on camera, but Tarek is grinning. I promise.
Yeah, here we go. Look. All right. See you guys later.
Thank you again.
So I know we have a lot of I know we have a lot of news to get to, but Emil Sinclair in the A4A chat is saying what Barrett Brown has been implicitly propagating is the notion that Assange is compromised. I would wager that he himself is compromised and he is the neo Sabu. So look, Barrett Brown, and I was having this conversation oh God. I can't remember if I had this conversation off camera or off camera. I really can't, but I was having a conversation about Barrett Brown, and it was centered around the idea that not only is he openly working with some or other three-letter agency, but he's so openly being that guy who is clearly compromised that that the only takeaway that you can have is he's being rewarded for trying to take down other people in the truth community. And I say that a little with a little bit of disappointment, because Barrett Brown is such a I don't know, prevalent and comedic figure in the early days of Anonymous. Now, whether he's the new Sabu, I think you're off about that, Emil, because he's not encouraging other people to go out and hack and then he's going to release those documents. He's not being paid to pressure people into committing crimes. But I do think that Barrett is not on our team. I'll say that. Oh, I will. And you can come at me, Barrett Brown. You can. I'll tussle with you. But
I don't know too much about the situation, but all I'll really say is the intelligence community uses the same playbook over and over and over again. So as long as you are read up on like what happened with Sabu and Siggy and all of the other groups that have been infiltrated and taken down and even just smeared and people that have been removed from communities, it kind of gives a good example about what this situation could or couldn't be.
And again, there's people who are asking who Barrett Brown is. So if you're not familiar with Barrett Brown, back in the early days of Anonymous, Barrett Brown was a very visual, very vocal supporter of Anons and was affiliated to the point to where he's included as part of this original Anon group collective. He made his bones by being a contrarian douchebag to the point to like a very confident, secure contrarian douchebag, like the opposite of Michael Tracy in terms of contrarian douchebags. Whereas Tracy is kind of like a gutter troll with a blue check, Barrett Brown was, a suave, sophisticated douchebag who would literally live stream from his bathtub while drinking wine. Like, it was fucking hilarious. But this dude got arrested while live streaming, while talking to people. His door got kicked in. Him and his girlfriend were handcuffed. All these the entire house was seized as evidence. He did 6 months in solitary and 4 years total and got out. Now, I don't know what that says to you, but a 4-year deal on a 25 to life charge tells me that some information was shared and some promises were made.
I mean, that's how plea deals work. The majority of cases in the U.S. end in some type of plea agreement.
Let's see. There are a couple of comments in here about this. Barrett was too confident for me. It felt like he knew he wouldn't be touched. No, I don't. So that's the problem when you start out like smug. You know, when you start out a little bit overconfident, you tend to think that you're bulletproof. And because of the people that he had allied himself with, like, you get into a place of confidence and comfortability because your crew rules the internet. But the internet happens on the internet, and your door gets kicked in by three-dimensional police officers who then hog tie you and smash your face down into the floor a few good times. So that's a wake-up call. Oh, you mean afterwards? Yeah, no. Afterwards, Barrett came out even more smug from jail than when he went in. There was no, like, there didn't seem to be a learning curve there. You know what I mean? There seemed to be a new spark. I don't know. I'm trying to be a little bit careful here, but come at me, Barrett Brown. Come at me. We can tangle. We can dance, buddy. We can. Get here! Shit!
I was just letting you have that one for a minute.
It's hot, dude. It's hot in California right now. I'm about to shed my jacket.
So I wanna dig into the piece about Reality Winner, if we could.
Yeah. Pull it up here.
Yeah, this is the article over on Shadowproof, written by friend of the show Kevin Gostola. It's titled.
Oh, you know what? That's who I was talking to about Barrett Brown. I was messaging back and forth on Twitter with Kevin for like an hour and a half the other day, and the conversation delved into that. The chat's going fucking. The chat's hilarious over my challenge to Barrett Brown. It's fucking funny if you get a sec to read through it. But yeah. So let's dig into the article. Again, friend of the show, Kevin Gostola. Shadowproof is his website. He also does a great podcast series where he talks about whistleblowers and has them on the show, like all kinds, every stripe of whistleblower. Huge props to Kevin Gostola, the good Kevin, the Kevin that we like. As a coronavirus outbreak at Federal Medical Center Carswell spreads, the United States government maintains National Security Agency whistleblower Reality Winner did not show her confinement placed her at a risk substantial to justify early release. Prosecutors additionally insist Winner confused a request for a reduction in her prison sentence with a request for home confinement and never started the, quote, administrative procedure, unquote, that must be completed before going to a district court for relief. But Winner's attorney, Joe Whitley, calls this a nonsensical theory that her request was not a request under the compassionate release statute. The district court did not embrace this position, although it denied her appeal. The entire colloquy is emblematic of the government position regarding Reality's compassionate release request and its scattershot approach to the COVID-19 pandemic at large, Whitney declares. In short, because the Bureau of Prisons was not prepared for this type of pandemic, a prisoner's last and only resort is the district court. Billy Winner Davis, who's been on this show, Reality Winner's mother told Shadowproof that her daughter feels she's suffering through this hell in a black hole where nobody seems to know or care what's happening to them. She believes denying her release was wrong and could have saved her from the suffering she currently must endure. Winner pled guilty in 2018 to one count of violating the Espionage Act when she disclosed an NSA report to The Intercept. Again, if you are considering becoming a whistleblower, do not talk to anyone from The Intercept, especially Matthew Cole. Lil narc some bitch. She believed the report contained evidence that Russian hackers targeted the United States voter registration systems during the 2016 election. She has served more than half of her 63-month sentence, the longest sentence, by the way, friends and neighbors, ever handed down to anyone under an Espionage Act violation. Her attorneys urged a federal court to release her to home confinement to serve the remainder of her sentence, but Judge Randall Hall sided with the Justice Department on April 24th and contended that the medical prison where Winner is incarcerated is presumably better equipped than most to deal with any onset of COVID-19 in its inmates. You want to tackle that sentence from the judge there, Andre?
Yeah, that the prison's more equipped to handle COVID-19 than others.
Yeah.
COVID-19 at this point has spread through the U.S. prison population to where I think it's like 70% of prisons have cases inside of them, and once it's in there, it spreads like crazy. We've seen Julian get his sentence, his home confinement and compassionate release denied as well with the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is something that around the world, whistleblowers and journalists are being still detained through. So it's, I don't know, it's fucked up that they're allowed to just keep this person in there who's literally done absolutely nothing except reveal information that wasn't even damaging to begin with.
So here's the thing, and this has been my theory the whole time, and we didn't discuss it when Reality's mom and sister were on the show, because it probably wouldn't have been well received. But if you actually look at the documents that Reality Winner leaked to The Intercept, and then The Intercept subsequently rolled over and told law enforcement that they had received these documents, because again, The Intercept is not a friend to whistleblowers. The documents themselves do more to poke holes in Russiagate than anything else. The language that is used in the documents is full of these weasel words like confidence and
May have and unsure of the success of, and multiple other things that literally say we don't even know if it was Russia. And the thing that it reminds me of is the use of Marble Framework that was disclosed in Vault 7, which basically, and these documents that Winner revealed, and thank her for doing it, didn't actually show any of the documentation of what the intelligence was, just the results of it and the plans. Basically, it didn't show the data, it just showed what someone wrote about it. And all of the may-haves and things like that point to the same thing with Russiagate at large, which is it's based around the idea that this one thing had a Russian stamp on it inside of this email, when we know through the releases of WikiLeaks that the CIA can modify what is actually shown in documents to say that they came from other countries and other sources. So the entire apparatus around her revealing these leaks really just shows that the U.S. intelligence agencies have no idea what the fuck is going on behind the scenes. And they're willing to just slap a Russian label on it and move on to the next thing.
And this goes back to what we've heard from Ray McGovern and from Bill Binney, and it was the level of confidence inside key people within the deep state that Hillary Clinton was going to be the next president, and they were going to be able to do all of the vile, dirty shit that they do in the dark, and everything was going to remain status quo. Because it's lazy work. Even the marble framework is lazy work. And it speaks to, I guess, smugnorance on the part of at least Comey and Clapper and Brennan, because for an NSA analyst to look at these documents, the amount of propaganda that must have been rolling through the offices there about the Russians and about this hack that never took place and about this coordinated effort by the most evil man on earth, Vladimir Putin, of course, not, Comey or Clapper or Brennan, but that he had been able to orchestrate this massive infiltration, not just of our voter data systems and our voter registration systems, but to turn the tide of an election in general. The amount of, I guess, double speak that must have been taking place within the halls of the NSA has got to be so egregiously over the top, because these aren't dumb people. I don't think for a moment that Reality Winner is an idiot. I don't think for a moment that she didn't 100% believe in what she was doing. It's just gotta suck to realize that what you had believed in was a complete fabrication. And for her to be serving this time, for her to be denied compassionate release,
and this is when
level
people
of
like
embarrassment that go ahead.
I was just going to say people like Michael Flynn and Roger Stone and things like that are getting commuted or released because of the level of bullshit that this is. And Reality Winner should be included amongst those people that were wrapped up in all of the litigation surrounding Russiagate and the entire fabrication of it. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Steve.
No, it's all right. Fred Edwards saying, I wish the MSM would stop blaming Putin. It was Boris and Natasha that colluded with Trump. And really, Fred, you're right. You're 100% right. Made up cartoon characters in a fabricated reality are basically the only thing driving the establishment narrative at this point. And we get, again, I mean, the whole, but Russians put bounties on U.S. soldiers thing. That fell apart almost instantly, and yet still people are trying to push that narrative. Because
we have an article later down in the show doc where it actually shows there's a lawsuit, multiple lawsuits going on right now between veterans and families of dead soldiers suing U.S. contractors in Afghanistan for literally funding the Taliban there, like paying them protection payments and literally giving them access to a larger pool of funds. So that whole Russia's putting hits out is a complete bullshit story, while at the same time, U.S. security contractors being paid by our government are paying and funding the Taliban.
Which, again, we knew, and we knew from WikiLeaks.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we've known this for almost a decade now. Let's see what happened. Whatever happened to the threats against Glenn by Bolivian president? It wasn't the Bolivian president trying to be fine. It was Jair Bolsonaro, the Brazilian president, and the Brazil's Supreme Court stepped in and said, you cannot target this journalist. You need to stop. When you bring charges, we're going to dismiss them, because this is a clear, politically, personally motivated attack on a journalist. And you're not just attacking a journalist, you're attacking journalism as you do this. So Bolsonaro was shut down not once but twice. And it really was. I mean, we talked about this, I think, with Ray McGovern, but it was just kind of a microcosm of what's happening to Julian Assange and what's happening to journalism worldwide. It took place in real time with Bolsonaro and Glenn Greenwald. And I'm glad that we still have Glenn Greenwald around, because it means that attack didn't work.
And it sets a international legal precedent too, to
Here's
where.
But the dismissal of the DNC's lawsuit against Julian Assange and WikiLeaks and the Russian government and everyone else they could sue, that dismissal that cites the Pentagon Papers specifically in the dismissal with prejudice of this lawsuit, that should set a legal precedent that, yes, WikiLeaks is a journalistic outlet, and yes, this outlet deserves the same protections that the Post got for releasing the Pentagon Papers. That's in a legal document. That happened last summer. And as far as the people who covered it, it's like us. And a couple other people talked about this. And that's fucking it. You know, it just frustrates.
Because that was when they started suing, right? When the DNC started suing Julian Assange, WikiLeaks, the Trump campaign, Russia, Vladimir Putin, whoever the fuck that troll farm was. That was the interview where Tom Perez said, "Yeah, we can walk and chew gum," and that was like a big story that they can walk and chew gum. And then when it gets dismissed, it's like no one talks about the fact that got thrown the fuck out after they spent months covering the fact that it existed in the beginning.
Well, yeah, it operated the same way that a redaction operates in a newspaper, where the headline is what they want people to remember, but that retraction on page 26, you know, that's a little bit of cover your ass, and that's all it takes. But people remember those months of headlines. They remember that propaganda. I did see something in my chat lamenting the downfall of democracy now, and I will get to that in a moment. Emil Sinclair said, "Is A4A soliciting Snowden to come on the show?" No, not actively. We've never sought or tried to open a channel of communication with Ed. I've got questions for him.
I messaged him on Twitter once or twice from the A4A account. Just haven't heard anything back. I messaged a lot of people on the A4A account trying to get them to come on, and I don't know if they either don't see it. There's a lot of times that Twitter doesn't send messages, or that people look at it and go, "I don't know what the fuck that is," and just go on to the next thing. So we try, but a lot of people like that are just harder to get in contact with.
And let me just say this about democracy now. Ray McGovern is a man of unqualified character. He's a very, very, very sincere and like noble type of individual. So when he interviews with me or A4A or Gordon Dimmick, and he starts to talk about democracy now, he immediately like pulls back, because he doesn't want to disparage too much the other work that they've done, while lamenting the fact that they pretty much bought the Russiagate narrative hook, line, and sinker. They had Glenn Greenwald on a number of times to rebut the Russiagate scenario. But again, when you've conditioned your listeners to think one way, or to only absorb like one sort of element of content, then it doesn't matter who you bring on as a guest to rebut, because your viewers, the people that are loyal to your show, are only going to hear your questions and your perspectives. And that's one of the reasons that that we try to get on, at least here and on my show, we try to get on people who have a different viewpoint or a different background or a skill set that with documentable proof goes outside of those narratives and tries to bring everything into a post-partisan reality, because the partisanship in Democracy Now's reporting when it comes to Russiagate is blatant, it is sad, and it represents the downfall of an organization that began in 1996 as one of the very few beacons of hope and truth in media.
I was sad when Democracy Now! Started becoming Russiagate just stooges.
Yeah.
Because the Gray Zone was pushing back against it, Jimmy Dore was pushing back against it, most of the other large online independent journalists at the time were pushing back, and they were the one of the few voices, them and TYT, that decided that they were just going to run with it and just push the Democratic Party line, and it was a really sad thing to see.
No, I agree. Holly Horn says Democracy Now! Is also pushing the white helmets and Syria regime change, and that is fucking brutal. There's a $20, $20.99 super chat in the Action for Assange chat. Rob Juno, thank you very much. It will go to Josh's beer fund. I think I owe Josh like $140 at this point. I'm gonna buy him a fucking keg and some dry ice to keep it in so it doesn't go bad.
I have a really old keg of PBR. If you want to use that, I'll just throw it in for free.
Yeah, I'm gonna pass.
Figured out offer.
Hard pass.
Let's dig in a little bit here to the open letter that came out from Reporters Without Borders in conjunction with the Courage Foundation. Because this came out back on Julian's birthday, July 3rd. So I think it's kind of important just to take a minute and look at this.
Sure. And again, and look, man, Reporters Without Borders was kind of walking the line between supporting Julian and not. They're the organization that came up with the idea to put a library in Minecraft that had basically everything but WikiLeaks in it, which then inspired us through I want to say, is it Kitty, Josh?
Yeah, it's Kitty. She's got the map mostly done. I got to start working on that again.
But yeah, Kitty Hundel, Unity for Jay, just a wonderful organizer and activist and tremendous human being. Started laying the groundwork to have a WikiLeaks library inside Minecraft. So in the last like month or so, Reporters Without Borders has stepped up their support of Julian Assange. So we need to commend them for that. David Simpson got more. Are you Simpson Media, David? I'm trying to figure this out, because if you are, then you were the person who was shooting at Belmarsh. Please let me know, because we would like to air some of that footage. I mean, I know it went out on a live stream that was on this channel and my channel and Unity for Jay and whatnot. And if you're available, please come on the show one of these Saturdays. So back to the article. In the run-up to the resumption of WikiLeaks publisher Julian Assange's U.S. extradition, I hate that fucking word, trial in September to mark his birthday on 3rd July, Reporters Without Borders has worked with the Courage Foundation on this open letter to the UK government, detailing extensive concerns about his treatment and continued persecution. We call on the UK government to uphold its commitment to press freedom and in its own country. So, dear Right Honorable Robert Butlin, QC, MP, and that's fancy talk for lawyer and member of parliament. On 8 June 2020, responding to a question in the House of Lords about the United Kingdom's stance regarding the protection of journalists and press freedom, Minister of State Lord Armada of Wimbledon said, quote, "Media freedom is vital to open societies. Journalists must be able to investigate and report without undue interference," end quote. We, the undersigned, agree with this statement and call on the UK government to uphold its commitment to press freedom in its own country. At the time of Lord Ahmad's remarks, WikiLeaks publisher Julian Assange had been imprisoned on remand in the high-security HMP Belmarsh for more than a year as he faces extradition, again, I hate that fucking word, to the United States on charges of publishing. We call on the UK government to release Mr. Assange from prison immediately and to block his extradition to the United States. The US government has indicted Mr. Assange on 18 counts for obtaining, possessing, conspiring to publish, and for publishing classified information. The indictment contains 17 counts under the Espionage Act of 1917 and one charge of conspiring with a source to violate the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which uses Espionage Act language. This is the first ever use of such charges for the publication of truthful information in the public interest, and it represents a gravely dangerous attempt to criminalize journalists, source communications, and the publication by journalists of classified information, regardless of the newsworthiness of the information and in complete disregard of the public's right to know. On 24th June 2020, the U.S. Department of Justice issued a second superseding indictment against Mr. Assange, adding no new charges, but expanding on the charge for conspiracy to commit computer intrusion. This new indictment employs a selective and misleading narrative in an attempt to portray Mr. Assange's actions as nefarious and conspiratorial rather than as contributions to the public interest reporting. These charges against Mr. Assange carry a potential maximum sentence of 175 years in prison. Sending Mr. Assange to the U.S., where a conviction is a near certainty, is tantamount to a death sentence. I'm going to pause there for a minute because this is longer than I thought.
The rest of this just goes into a lot of the stuff that we've actually talked about today on the stream. But that outline right there and that framing that they put on, short of the word extradition, short of directly calling out the expansion of the intelligence state, I think that this is a great open letter, and it could actually be used as a really good example to send around to other institutions and organizations, including your local city councils, as what an open letter in support of Julian Assange looks like from these organizations. Because right now there's a push in Australia, and I would love to see it happen in New Zealand and France and the UK and here in the US, to get people working at their city council level to have individual cities come out in support of Julian. So if you're someone who's interested in doing that and are willing to go to a city council meeting, whether they host them in person or online right now, taking a letter like this and saying, this is the Reporters Without Borders letter, could our city write something similar, is a really, really powerful way to try to drum up support for Julian on a local level, but also with other organizations that you may work with.
And again, we've got individual city councils all over Australia, and a couple, I believe, in New Zealand that are releasing similar statements and trying to pressure higher levels of government than what their individual city councils are, into at least releasing a statement of support. And it can't be that fucking hard. It can't be. Like not to, I don't, I'm about to get emotional, and I don't want to do that. Like I don't want to fucking freak out. As this isn't the political vigilante. I'm not going to threaten to punch anyone or fucking throw shit or anything like that. But I'm about to get emotional over that, and I'm trying to like reel it in. So real quick, David Simpson, if you're still watching right now, please message me on Twitter and we'll get you scheduled and we'll figure out when we can incorporate the footage that you've been shooting into these vigils. In terms of...
Did we drop Steve or did I drop?
No, I think we dropped Steve.
I think we dropped Steve. Well,
Kevin, you motherfucker.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone for watching this. No, yeah, but I think we can wrap up then if Steve got dropped off, because we only had one other piece and we can save that for Tuesday to really dig into it, because it's discussing the most wanted leaks, and there's a couple other pieces I wanted to kind of pull together for that too. Right. So because he's still pretty frozen. I would like to thank everybody for joining us. My name is Andrew Smith. You can find me on Twitter at Andrew Zigman. You can find us on Twitter at action_4Assange or actionforassange.com. My co-host, Steve Poikinen, you can find him on YouTube at Slow News Day Show or Slow News Day Podcast. And yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone, and a special thank you to Tarek for hopping in at last minute to join us today. Yeah, good luck to us all.